and welcome again, everyone. Just to say good evening. I'm Bowen Dwelle here, Battery Craven residence, and been fantastic to be part of the battery community here for the past several years. I mean, really since the battery began. And like I said, looks like we got about 15 or so far this evening. Please do, I encourage you all to turn on your video so we can see each other as we get going here. And there we go. Good to have plenty of water. Excellent. So I'm here with my friend and colleague, Michael Lipson. And our goal this evening is not so much to talk to you guys. We'll do just a little bit of that, by way of kind of setting up the conversation. But most of all, our goal here is to facilitate a conversation, to open a conversation around relationships and sex. Because really, the more we talk about everything, and certainly that subject, the better for all of us. And that's certainly been my experience. And often feel kind of compelled to help us all have more of that conversation. So the plan for this evening session is that we'll just do a couple more minutes of kind of setting up here, and then we will do a quick meditation together to just kind of settle in, get into our bodies, and then we'll Michael and I'll have a little conversation just to kind of throw some ideas into the air, and then we'll open it up to talk amongst the whole group. Encourage all of you again to use your cameras, and of course there's everyone knows Zoom at this point, so I'm not going to go through all the features, chat, all that sort of thing. Use as you wish. So so I think just before we just by way of anything further introduction, Michael, that you want to say, or
a couple things. First off, Bowen and I want this to be experiential as opposed to talking heads, one directional. As part of EVRYMAN, whether you've heard of it or not, we think experiential is somatic. There's a lot of feeling state instead of head state. Us guys, we tend to be, when you think about the sexes, us guys tend to be hunters. We have purpose. We like projects. We like to get shit done. We're scanning, we're doing. We often identify ourselves and feel more successful when we are productive. Whereas the women tend to be more gatherers. They're receiving, they're holding. We have that penetrating energy. They have that receiving energy. So what we've discovered in EVRYMAN is that us guys have been largely conditioned to not slow down, to not quiet ourselves, and not to feel. Like, don't be a wussy. So we're actually going to consciously invite you to feel tonight and experiment with that. And for some guys, they don't do that. And if that feels alien, be with that. Be with the discomfort of that. Be with the unknowing of it. So the idea of doing a little meditation is to slow us down. In EVRYMAN, we use a formula that we call ROCK. R stands for relax. That relax is getting us out of productivity mode and getting us out of hunting and searching and impressing and just slowing it down. And when you slow down and you feel your breath, all of a sudden you get in touch with some part of the inner conversation that you might not access when you're out there doing your deals or starting your businesses or hitting on whatever beautiful woman you might be interested in or beautiful man you might be interested in. So we start with a relaxed slow down. Once you're there, which could take long, but we're going to do it really short because we don't have a lot of time. Then you get into the O, which means open. Now that I'm a little quieter, I'm more open. I'm open to what? Oh, I'm open to what I'm really thinking, what I'm really feeling, instead of just the program that's running. And the C of ROCK stands for connect. once I'm open, I connect to that deeper awareness, that deeper knowledge, that deeper wisdom. And what we discover is that we all, as humans, have this programming and these little bits of trauma, these little bits of experiences that aren't exactly necessarily the way we would wish to run our show. They're kind of burned into our operating systems at a young age, conditioned in. So we're going to explore a little bit of how sex and relationship, what's been burned in and programmed into our OS in that theme, and then slow down and have you guys consider how that's working. And is there something that is stirring around there? Is there some discomfort or some joy or something that triggers when you touch into those places that you might not otherwise touch? So when we do this, the agreement is that we maintain confidentiality so that we have a safe enough place for you guys to say whatever you want to say. And we're not asking for big leaps. You do as much as you want. And that's the second agreement, is kind of self-regulation. Participate at the level you want. If you don't want to share anything, or if there's nothing like, deep and true that you care to touch, then don't. And if there is, then go for it. Okay. And the third thing, to state the obvious, is this isn't therapy and we're not therapists, and that's not our angle. We're just giving you a place to consider, to stimulate some thinking, and then to consider where you land, where you are, and all that. Okay?
Yeah, thanks, Michael. And just to emphasize, though, absolutely participate at, and share what, in a way that makes that where you're comfortable. That said, right, and we're assuming that you're here for a reason, and so if you feel that there's a question that's coming up, something that you want to work on, this will be the opportunity to do that. So don't hesitate. Excellent. Well, let's do just that then. Let's take a minute to drop in. Michael, I'm going to invite you to lead us in that as well,
Right.
if you'd like.
All right. So whether you are familiar with meditation or not, this is pretty simple. You can't do it wrong. The goal is just to slow down. We call it down regulating in the psychology world. So it can help to have your spines relatively erect, and it can help to be in a comfortable place. You could be lying down or not. This is only like 3 minutes. So this is a no big deal thing. So I'm going to close my eyes. You can if you want. You don't have to. And as we close our eyes, or not, I invite you to slow it down. The first thing I'm going to invite you to do is notice your breath. In fact, even before that, notice your belly, and allow your belly to blob out, like relax, intentionally relax your belly. Us guys, a lot of us like to look good, and we walk around trying to hold it in, to look solid and to show the abs. The opposite, just let it go. And maybe let your shoulders go. Relax your shoulders and feel gravity. Let gravity sink you. And with your belly relaxed, I'm going to ask that you in-breath through your nostrils slowly, maybe to the count of 5, from your belly, if you know how to do that. I'm going to in-breath 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then pause. 2, 3, 4, 5, and relaxed out breath. 2, 3, 4, 5, and find a cadence that works for you. Focus on your belly, or focus on the feeling of air coming in and out of your nostrils. And as you do this, all we're doing is slowing down, relaxing.
This very basic pattern of breathing and pausing at both at the top and the bottom of the breath. Pausing after your inhale with the lungs full, and then exhaling, pausing with your lungs empty. It's also known as box breathing, right? One of the simplest. and most effective techniques to slow down. You can really use this in any situation.
Just going to ask that you let this relax you. And we're just going to do this for a bit longer, but as an experiment, I'd like you to put as much awareness as possible on your right big toe. Don't worry about your breath. Let it go however it goes. And notice the position of your toe, the temperature, the orientation. Great. And now, as weird as it sounds, I'm going to ask you to move and put your attention where your sternum is. And behind your sternum, some call it the heart center or the heart chakra. Notice what that feels like, if anything. Notice if you can feel it. Not everybody feels this stuff. Great. And we could take this for a while, but in the interest of time, I'm going to ask that we wrap this up in 30 seconds to just go back to breath. Notice breath, however you wish to breathe. Seek to have your breath be smooth and creamy without glitches. You might even consider that you're being breathed. The world is breathing you. You don't even have to do it because you can't help but do it. So what if you entirely let go and you let the world breathe you for a moment? And you just follow. And you sit in a space of there is nothing I have to do. The world is breathing me. I'm just sitting here in my space. Great. Another 10 seconds will complete. And when you're ready, open up your eyes, come on back, and we'll get into the program. And you might just, as you do that, you might look around for a second just to kind of get back in the here and now. You might even consider if you feel any different than you felt before. In fact, just if your camera's on, show of hands, if you feel the same, raise your hand. And if you feel a little slower, more relaxed, raise your hand.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So that technique, just as an aside, if you practice that a minute a day, like once or twice or 3 times, you will actually be doing reps to train yourself to invoke relaxation in any state, including a stress state, including when you get all choked up or you're a boss or you get a heavy statement or whatever else. So that is very basic mindfulness training and a good place for us to be when we have this conversation.
Thank you. Or any conversation.
Yeah.
You know, and definitely good, just a good technique to have in your toolbox, so to speak, that basic box breathing technique. Yeah, right on. Well, let's get into it. And like I said, we'll have just a quick conversation here, kind of at the front of the room, and then open it up. The reason, the way I wrote the title, essentially in description for this event, you know, relationships and sex, is the core of that is that they're often talked about as separate things, right? It's like, are we talking about a relationship or are we talking about sex? You know, and along with everything else, part of my core invitation here this evening is to talk about them together, and to consider. I mean, of course, they're interrelated, right? Of course, but to really consider that, and to you know, to give us a space to talk about how they're related in particular for, you know, in our experience, because again, it's just so often that they're talked about as sort of separate things, and that there's certainly certain stereotypes, you know, that perhaps some of us, experience about the differences, the stereotypical, some real, some not, whatever differences between how men and women ex- are in these realms of relationship and sex, um, and sort of how we, how do we learn about them, and how do we get better at at both and at the whole thing together. Um, so here's a question, I mean, Michael, right? Like what's one of the things that was a real hard lesson for you, a really meaningful something that you learned about relationships and sex over the course of your life, your experience as a man?
Hmm. Well, I'll tell you that what I first felt when you said that
Hmm.
was I felt being a teenager and being uneducated and being intimidated and scared and feeling like I needed to perform. So there was a lesson sort of about how much that sucked and how bought in I was to like the system, and how
Hmm.
my identity and sense of self was wrapped up in that. And how I, in a sense, in reflection, I lost who I was because I wanted to be accepted and deliver and perform, et cetera, et cetera.
When you say perform, what do you mean?
What I meant is I wanted to be seen with a woman or women that were attractive and have people think that I was having sex because it would increase my social currency and my respect in the locker room. And if
Hmm.
I say that, I can feel how yucky that was for me and how much I kind of abandoned what really mattered to me, which was I was one of those guys that didn't game girls a lot, but I felt left behind and I felt like, I wasn't going to get invited to all the cool shit. Right. So then when
Yes.
you ask about lessons between relationships and sex, I think what I really learned, Bowen,
Hmm.
is to eventually chuck the social program and feel good about who I was being. And from there, I was a lot more open and available. And that really helped my relationship because I'm being true to myself as opposed to being what I thought the world was telling me to do.
Hmm. Yeah, man. Well, I feel you there for sure. Um, and
What did you learn? What is one of the things that you really learned?
yeah, thanks. It's related, and it's that, um, and this didn't really become clear to me until, I mean, really until my 40s, and I just turned 51. Um, was that, I mean, I love sex, and I was always pursuing sex, and partly for the reason that you just cited, that it's like, the sort of, to be successful as a man, that's part of our training, is like, you got to have sex, you got to be seen as having sex. um, um, and yet what I learned, I mean, what much later on in life, is that, what I wanted, is connection. What I want is connection, and that comes in many forms. It comes, part of it is the physical aspect of sex. Um, Part of it is, all the way through the spectrum to the kind of spiritual connection in relationship, and the heart connection, um, and the togetherness, and even just back towards the sexual, like the touch, right? So there's a whole spectrum of connection, and that that I was really starved for connection, and so that was behind a lot of my, even kind of desperation, yeah, for sex, right? Which I certainly, hear that from, that's part of the stereotype of men, is like men want sex. And I know from, my experience, that's what part of the reason why we want it so much is because we're often starved for connection. And it's kind of the only way that we know to connect. And so that's part of also the frame, is what brought, brings it back to, well, if that's the only way that we know to connect, well, then we're going to keep going for that. So how do we learn to connect more, and get the whole thing in a broader frame. And the other thing that I learned is that connecting with other men, it's not that it makes me want less sex, but that really turned out to be the best way to practice relationship. And that practicing relationship with men, because I'm a hetero guy, therefore practicing relationship with men is like practicing relationship, but without the sex. That turns out to be an amazingly effective way to practice a lot of what is a relationship, and be able to bring that back to my relationships with women. I see you nodding. How does that sit with you, Michael?
Well, I'm just thinking about how the science says that guys are a lot lonelier than women,
Mm-hmm.
and that the majority of guys want other guy friends and that guys generally aren't very real with their other guy friends. That may not be the population here. And so I get it. It's safer with a guy because the rejection may not feel the same as with a woman if you're hetero. The other thing I was thinking about is when you say want connection,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like the programming is for us to want conquest and not for us to want connection. And a lot of the modeling, like what's in the movies and what's on TV and what happened as I was growing up was conquest. And I think as we get in touch with what's going on inside, we get increasingly real about, where the connection fits in and why that's so important. And
Well,
it's sort of provocative for me to consider everybody on the call. It's like, when you think about sex, what's really driving you? How much is conquest, achievement, identity? How much is connection? I want to be held. I want to be touched. Can you even separate them?
mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think we're just about there to, what that leads me or leaves me is yes, or to say yes, that absolutely a lot of our programming is not about connecting, and that is a big part of the reason why so many men are depressed. I mean, Johan Hari writes very deeply about this in his recent book. And I mean, not just men, I mean anyone. If we don't have connection, we get depressed. So we got to learn, the more we learn about how to connect, the better. Here's a question, to kind of turn it out to you guys. And here's something that I started thinking about a lot more in the last few years, is just asking myself and others, right? What is, I mean, these two sides of the same coin, or related coin. What is relationship for? And what is sex for? Why do I want to be in relationship? Why do I want to have sex? I mean, it feels good, but beyond that. So just putting those kind of out to the room, as prompts here to stir the pot. Right? What is sex for you? And what is relationship for? What's the reason to be in a relationship? And
Go ahead,
so much,
Jason.
right? I mean, if I
you're
look back
you're on, man. Yeah, raise your hand.
my 20s, 30s, 40s, right? It's like it depends on what stage. I have a very different view over certainly the last 2 years than I did 8 years ago, and I'm doing much more contemplating and thinking and being confounded about those questions now than I ever have.
So what's true for you right now about that, Jason?
So your first question, Bowen, I'm 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 learning to unlearn uh, what I was always seeking and what I defined as love and fulfillment in a relationship, because I have learned that the modeling I had and the choices I made were just not the right ones. And so now I think I've kind of gotten through the phase of changing my initial reaction. You know, I had to go through a period of doubting my preferences in a person to now where I think I kind of know what to look for, I think. But there still is a lot of doubt and and so I'm aware on this side I'm having difficulty being aware of what I'm getting into, and so there's this period of, well, I don't want a relationship, or I don't want a permanent relationship, or I don't want to get too deep because it's just too much. So the answer is I don't know, but I think I'm progressing.
That's yeah, man. Thank you. I appreciate you jumping in, and I mean something that you just really hit me. Just what you just said. It's that relationship can feel like too much. Can you say anything more about that? Is there, anything that you feel?
Yeah,
What are you
it
feeling about
seems.
that?
Oh, I think this is the. I mean, most of us seem like we're all in our 40s or older. Um, I'm just tired of taking care of people.
Mm.
And it seems like you began with the we hunt, and so we're in a way we're hunting, we're the cat coming back in with the mouse in its mouth, home, and that the gatherer or the women want to receive.
Mm.
And so I have a difficult time. I feel like sometimes I just don't want to have another heart to fill, mouth to feed,
Mm.
um, person to support. And that's what I mean by it's sometimes feels like too much, because I feel like the women that seem to be attracted to me and that maybe I'm initially attracted to want so much and give not much.
I
Yeah,
can
man.
sympathize with that. Even as a married guy, Devin
Hey,
here.
Devin.
Hey, Jason. But I can sympathize with that feeling. I mean, I'm a dad. I've got 2 young kids and a lovely family, and my wife's wonderful. But that need for connection, we talk about, relationship and how that correlates with sex. Everybody's got obviously a different origin story and growth pattern through that. But I really can sympathize with Jason. And sometimes you don't necessarily want to be the guy who's just coming in with a kill and saying, here it is for you, and then you reward me with the physical attention or what have you. You want that deeper connection, that almost, I'm not going to say sameness, but like, you get together and you have this relationship that is beyond just that kind of, this is my role and that's yours. It is a deeper connection. And I think for me, as I'm 37 and I'm learning more about myself, I saw sex as a way to get that closeness. I had an abusive relationship with my father, and so I sought female attention to make myself feel good and feel good about myself and feel fulfilled and like I was worth something. and it was very unhealthy for a long time, for sure. And that led to, many partners and unhealthy situations and unhealthy relationships. And I'm thankful that I have a healthy relationship, but it almost feels like you have to battle to keep it healthy, right? You have
Yeah.
to battle to have that relationship so it doesn't turn into a transaction or a, you know,
Yeah, man.
so
Well,
it's hard.
yeah, Devin, thank you, both of you guys for speaking up. And I mean, I think what you're bringing up right there, Devin, is this bargain that we often end up in because of all the, all the programming, essentially, just how we're acculturated, that as where relationship is this kind of exchange where men get connection in the form of sex in exchange for providing. I mean, that's the traditional bargain, and that is a fucked up bargain for everyone. I mean, unless you're, really in the cave, I mean, just in the modern world, that model's obsolete, and yet we're still operating with a lot of that programming. And I think I just heard you say some of the same of my experience, that, yeah, I mean, that's the way that I knew to get the connection that I needed so badly was sex. So I would do a lot, I would bargain away a lot to get that, and, often get it in kind of screwed up, or in from partners who weren't providing anything else. Right.
Well,
And
I
then,
almost wonder if some of our caveman programming, I see this in myself sometimes as a dad, because I'm really sensitive to how I treat my children because of how I was raised. It's like certain things we're just wired to do. And I wonder if that trade-off, because it happened for so long in the male female or male to male or just power dominance struggle, doesn't matter the gender, but I just wonder if we're always going to fight that at some level, and maybe being aware of that, just like we do with our mindfulness practice with meditation, with maybe just being aware of that, you can cultivate the relationship and not focus on that power struggle or trade-off.
yeah, I hear you, and I think the jury's out on the, how much is literally in our DNA. But I can just tell you my experience. I'd love to hear, some others speak to this, is that the view from the inside always seems real, and what's normal, right, that changes, and the new normal then seems normal. So, you know our we can change our programming, and in quite a lot, even just in our lifetime. And my experience has been, and I've heard this from many other men, that as we experience more real connection, right, that we don't need so desperately, we don't need sex so desperately for that only purpose, and it becomes a much more full-featured experience, right, that's much richer, and is part of a relationship where there is connection flowing, right, in many ways. That's not just about this kind of primitive exchange, right?
So I have an idea in this conversation. Devin, I'm hearing you say a little bit of the way I want it to be is. I'd like to invite everybody to just bookmark the way I want it to be is. The way I want relationship to be for me is, the way I want sex in the relationship to be, and just notice, take a pause. How do you want it to be? And what, if any, feelings come up? Hope, despair, confusion. And I'm interested to hear what each of you, the way you want it to be, and what comes up around that. Anybody want to kick that off?
Well, I'm 44 and I spent most of my 20s and 30s in conquest mode, validating myself by how many and how hot and, I'm straight, all that. And then I recently ended my longest, maybe not my most significant, but my longest relationship. It was about 6 years, who I intentionally chose an equal, right? Equal in career, equal in age, equal. She didn't need me. And that was really important to me because I didn't want a mouth to feed or a heart to feed. I think, Jason, you said that earlier. And I've been in those situations and I didn't want that. And I see my friends in that situation. But the problem was, it got to the point where she didn't care if we had sex or not. And I want her to want that connection with me. It's no longer about the thrill of orgasm that it was to me when I was 33 years old. It's about being in a relationship where it's important to that person that we connect on that most intimate level on some sort of a regular basis. And at the end of the day, I think that for me, that's how I want it to be. And it wasn't. And eventually I had to leave because it felt like I was living with a roommate and not a partner. Mm-hmm. And that's why when I saw this come up, actually, I was like, this might be a perfect time for me to listen in on this conversation. I didn't know if I would say anything or not, but because this is a point of reflection in my own life, right? Because I haven't dated anyone since I left my last relationship. And I'm thinking a lot about what does that look like for me?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So Ryan, if we were in a kind of everyman intensive, I would have you drop in to the desire. You really clearly stated a desire, and underneath it is feelings. What does that feel like? Where is it in your body? What emotions come up around it?
It feels like rejection.
Feel rejection in your body somewhere?
Yeah.
And how does that make you feel? Sad, angry, fearful, shame?
Sad. Like a failure.
Yeah, I feel you.
So I feel you too. Thank you. And that is the entry into letting that behind. Feeling the feelings that we deny moves the energy so we can get beyond them. And it's possible that you have resistance to dating in the next one because you don't want that OE again. That sucks. So when you're with that for a while, it starts to diminish. And just to give other guys time, I just kind of put you in a state, but I'm wondering what came up for anybody in listening or feeling Ryan? That was very real.
I'll say what came up for me. Because I feel the same way as Ryan does, but I think my story is very different. So the notion of sex being a form of connection, and I'm 52, is what I sort of really look for and yearn for. But I'm in a relationship was the exact opposite. So for me, having that regular connection is really important. Of the person I'm dating, sex once a day would be the minimum. So for me, it's not about the never having it. Is how do you avoid it from turning into just routine? Because literally, like, there is no just go home and go to bed. So, but I want the same thing, but it's the exact opposite.
Right.
And then obviously the feelings are the exact opposite because the feelings are of shame, I don't know, inadequacy. the goal is not to turn into just a routine mechanics.
Mhm.
And what's the shame
Thank
and
you.
inadequacy, Evan? Explain
Of not being able to perform.
Got it.
And I don't mean physically not being perform. It's just like, I'm tired. I just want to go to bed.
Totally.
So you're confronted every night with, oh shit, man, I got to perform. I've got to be on doing this
Right.
instead of just self-care, which in a way you're abandoning yourself in some way.
Correct.
To take care of her.
Correct.
Mhm.
Which again could lead me into the same situation as Ryan, which is leaving the relationship because like I just don't need that every night.
Yeah, it's interesting. Thank you so much. Yeah, and I mean, what hits me, you know, from what you just shared, Evan, to both you guys, really is the feeling of, well, yeah, disappointment and sadness and of like being out of like something missing and out of balance, but of something of missing, and you know, missing the yeah, to me that's, you know, that it's like, well, what else is there, you know? Well, I want you know, to answer, you know, Michael's question, it's like the way I want it to be is balanced and vibrant, right, with a lot of energy flowing in, you know, so that where some of that energy, or sometimes it comes through, often it comes through as like sexual desire, sexual energy, and not only that at all, so, and where it's, you know, it's coming through as like powerful relating connection feeling, and if it's kind of one or the other exclusively, almost exclusively, would, you know, you guys just articulated kind of both, you know, two ends of that spectrum, there's something really missing. And there's, you know, one way of thinking about it, or feel, you know, I feel it is like, well, there's not enough energy flowing in, you know, in the, you know, that's how we open this whole conversation, is relationship and sex, you know, are they separate or are they intertwined and you know, really flowing and feeding each other? And it is very, I mean, I've had that experience too for many years where, I mean, they were kind of separate and not really feeding each other very well. You know, I was getting a lot of sex, but not really enough relating. Or, you know, in other cases, I had kind of, you know, sisters, you know, great female friends, you know, like you said, Ryan, kind of, yeah, but well, we just don't even need to have sex, you know, and there isn't that kind of energy isn't there. It's a real challenge how to, yeah, get to the point where get to more of a balance.
And yet they're still ourselves. That's what I mean. I'm sure we've all been in. Like I was married for 17 years and we barely had sex in that entire period.
Hmm.
And then I've been in other relationships where, you know, like it's constant. But yet here we are, right? We still exist and you know, we're the permanent ones, right?
It's,
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, like Evan and I have mirror situations, but I feel like Evan, I feel like we're brothers, you know what I mean? Like, because it's the same thing. We just, but it's like there's this whole idea of, will it ever be exactly equal? Probably not.
Mm-hmm.
What is the role of empathy?
Mm.
Right? At what point should my ex have realized this was important to me? And there are harder things that she could have done than have sex with me. right?
Yeah.
I don't know. You know, I don't know. I also have a friend whose wife is an absolute nightmare. I don't respect her at all, but and her currency in that relationship is serving his every sexual desire, and he shares the details with me, and she does a good job. But like, you know, that's not the relationship of equals that's going to work for me either. So I don't know. I don't know. That's for sure.
I hear you. I hear you. Well, I could say something else, but I want to leave.
I was gonna
Good.
mention one thing that's interesting here that keeps popping up in my head is this trade-off between the relationship and the sex, or the way it kind of spins around, you know,
Yeah.
as you were saying, Bowen. And in my own experience, I think what I want, I'm definitely getting on the physical side, but a lot of times that's not filling the hole in my
Mm,
chest,
mm,
you know, that
mm,
void of connection
mm,
that I so desire. And I have a lot of close friendships. One of my good friends is on this call. Thankfully, we didn't necessarily time that up, but I have a lot of great friendships with guys.
mm,
I have a strong friends group, and sometimes I feel like those relationships that I have with my friends are stronger,
mm,
maybe even than the bond I have with my sexual partner and spouse.
mhm.
And obviously, it's complicated when you have little children and you're, you know, I'm self-employed and running a company and doing all these other things, but it's really not, for me, the physical aspect is important, but it's becoming so much less about the physical and more about that void that we need to fill with self-worth and understanding and you know, validation at times, and hearing me, and you know, all these things
Mhm.
that every man needs and every woman needs, but we have different ways of communicating those things. And yeah, it's interesting to just think about that symbiosis.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Thank you. You're going, yeah, just kind of where I was, you know, feeling to go to, and in that, and you were saying, Ryan, you know, right? Is there, you know, you're gonna find the sort of the perfect balance, the perfect relationship, the perfect person? No, there's no perfect. Um, but what has gotten me a little bit closer, and I mean, believe me, like, you know, I could go through my history, and it's like, it's, you know, it's as screwed up as, you know, it's more than many, I don't know, anyway, more, you know, a little bit closer to like the way I want it to be, is not, you know, that I have necessarily a better checklist or whatever of like who I'm looking for, but it has been exactly this conversation of kind of breaking down the separation between relationship and sex, right? And of really, you know, feeling how they're intertwined, right? And just opening up some of the, you know, just saying, for example, you know, as some of us have this evening, that, well, yeah, like I really, you know, that's part of the reason I want sex so much, is to connect. You know, being able to say that just to a partner, right? Not that that's necessarily going to get the right answer, but being able to say it and bring that into the relationship, right, changes the tone and the frame of what, you know, helps to change the tone and the frame of like what sex is, right? It's, you know, it's not, it's less again about this separate thing. It's part of, you know, part of the conversation.
So here's another angle, something else to consider. As I listen, I hear some yearn for connection, being held, being safe, being warm. And on the other side, creativity, energy, fire, flame. And think about, how do they coexist? And how do you, on the mixing board of your emotions or your life or your moves, how do you play it so that, and that's just you balancing. Now there's the other one, your partner, and they're having that same dance too. And what does it really take to have that range for both and to meet in the middle with both. And Esther Perel, if you know her and all her famous relationship stuff, she talks about the fundamental conflict between couples when they take care of each other and they get really comfortable. And that's one part of being married successfully forever. And then the other part is to take risk and be fiery and be flamey and have awesome sex. And she said they're diametrically opposed. And you expect to get all that in one person? That design is all fucked. So there's another riddle in this whole thing. Where do we get it? How do we mix it? You know, how do we blend it? And I just want to throw out that out there. And I also wanted to check in with Ian and Kevin, since neither of you guys have shared anything. And I want to make sure you guys get a chance if there's something that's cooking for you. Looks like Kevin's making a move.
Sorry, I was trying to cook dinner and listen at the same time or get ready. But no, so I've been single for about 5 years now. My wife unfortunately died about 5 years ago, and I'm just I'm trying to find the right mate. And I think it resonated with me, you know, when you talked at first about conquest, because that's kind of, as the other guys brought up, that's kind of the way I was raised and I viewed sex. And now I need to turn that around. And I'm really, I mean, what I'm looking for, you know, the answer to, you know, what we would like to have in sex is now is love and intimacy. You know, it's different. It's totally different than conquest. So, you know, then my question to myself and to you is how, so I know that's what I want, right? But then, you know, how do I accomplish that, right?
Hell of a question. Who is the Kevin that is most inviting or understanding that that's looking at? You know, what part of you, what you has the highest opportunity for success in generating and receiving that?
Yeah, that would be hopefully my higher self, my evolved self, right? The person I'd like to be, the more loving, caring, connecting person.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
How's it feel to say that and have that be heard?
Yeah.
Oh, it feels great. Yeah, I mean, it feels good to express it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Hey, Ian, I see that you're not muted, and I know we're getting towards time. Bowen and I can stay on longer if we want, but you got the mic if you want. Want to share something?
I think it's great that these men's, I've been in many men's circles, and I think it's a great way to connect, and I think it's good work. The one thing that to whatever extent to offer this, what I think the opportunity here is of this group. What was the name of the author? Esther something? Yeah, I wanted to write that down. I think
Perel, yeah.
Esther Perel.
Yeah.
That's who Michael mentioned, yes.
Yeah, it's that idea that it's all, whatever the setup was, that whatever that vision is of that perfect, spicy this and complete mental satisfaction on that model is fucked, I think was the exact quote, something of that nature. But I don't know if it's possible to get everything that one needs. I don't even think that it's healthy to look for that. And I think the beauty of this meeting and of looking to other men is that when we share the wholeness of who we are, I think a lot of what we're looking for, I'll speak for myself, a lot of what I would be looking for, that I'm looking for in my wife, I actually only find in my male friends.
Mm-hmm.
I only find in myself. I was looking in the wrong place. I don't think we can look to somebody else to complete us. I think that model's fucked too. And I think the more whole that we can be within ourselves, the less we need somebody. And then obviously, strangely enough, the more we attract the person that we actually want. So the opportunity for me in these meetings is to get more whole with people that we don't have a sexual relationship with, because when the sex comes in, all this other shit comes in that doesn't actually help, doesn't actually get us closer to the fullness that we want to find within ourselves, or probably find it through the other male relationships. And that there's a lot of value to that. And I think the magic of this meeting, and I don't know, these kind of meetings, it sounds like you guys run them, I'm sure, is that you see men, it's not the right word, finding that strength, but finding that fullness, that richness, that complexity, probably where they should find it, which is in the fullness of a full life. And the other model that's fucked is that we're supposed to, we get this myopic focus on one person, and we have kids and we get pulled in. And then not only are we supposed to find it in one person, we're almost not allowed to find it in anybody else. And that model's fucked too.
Yeah.
So the opportunity of these kind of groups is to say, yeah, that's right, I can't find that in one person, and that's fucked, and I'm not even going to try. So I'm going to find a bunch of cool guys who bring that kaleidoscope of different things to me, and I'm going to become more whole for myself. Anyway, that's my 2 cents after listening in.
Yeah, right on. Well, it sounds like, yeah, you've had some of that experience, Ian, and yeah, absolutely. That's part of definitely part of the premise here in inviting, and convening this talk this evening is exactly that, is that the practice that we get in relating with each other, just makes us, better people, and it's but also, yeah, helps to fill some of those needs for connection that we often unreasonably look to a single partner to fulfill. And
if I could add one thing to that, I was thinking, besides having male friends, like what I've found in the last couple of years is having female friends,
Absolutely.
to bond with and connect with and share with is really important, especially with, like I mentioned, my history of conquest, and just in realizing that women don't exist for us to have our conquest. They're in getting to know them in that realm.
Thank you, Kevin. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and just to riff off that a little bit more, I mean, this thing of like how to find more of a balance, right, and of an energetic exchange that is more interesting, really. That's kind of how I've come to think of it, is like, if it's just one end of the spectrum, it's just not that interesting after some time. If it's all sex or all or no sex, it's just not as interesting. So how to get, to be more interesting? Well, as Ian, was saying, right? And for me, it's really helped to practice relating with other men. That has really helped me to bring a fuller me to my relating with women, which in turn has really helped to enliven those relationships with women, whether they're sexual or not, right? Some of them end up being, Kevin, as you pointed out, like what I call, sisters, and I'm very grateful to have a lot of those relationships. So yeah, totally agree. We gotta, work amongst ourselves. The more that we do, the more fruit, we get back, for sure, in terms of richness. We are at the end of the hour here. Michael and I are available to to hang tight for a bit if, if anybody wants to, or if y'all want to for a little bit more. But just to flag that we are at 7, and we've put our contact information in the chat there. We're both available to, if you feel like reaching out, please do so. And, we've got all sorts of resources to share with you guys, including the EVRYMAN groups themselves. So just be aware that's in that info's there in the chat.
I have one other
Evan.
quick thought.
Yeah.
And I'm just surprised that this didn't come up earlier. I didn't bring it up earlier, but the pandemic has really put a lot of stress on that relationship for me as an extrovert and a guy who's, usually in 5 to 10 in-person meetings a day with clients that I'm really good friends with. That disappeared. And I'm not only did that affect my ego with my business taking a massive hit, as I'm a retailer and own some retail businesses, but it also puts so much more stress. I didn't even realize when I said, like, fill that void, that the void was the relationships that I couldn't have through the pandemic, that just no matter how many times you connect on Zoom, it just didn't fill that spot for me, which as an extrovert was seeing my friends, all the time. And I put all that stress on my spouse. And that Ian's comments were super helpful, because it's really interesting how I haven't even really thought much about how the relationship with my spouse went through so many different changes in the last year. And as guys, we just want to have a project. I want to have something to work on and something to get better at. My business, I couldn't really do much of that with because of the restrictions. And so I put so much into my relationship with my spouse, which has been great, but it's also added weight to it, right? We think about the weight that goes on to our partners for some of these relationships through the pandemic, because our ability to connect was restricted. So anyways, last thing I wanted to mention was I just hit me, like, I haven't even acknowledged that to her. It's amazing to me that I haven't acknowledged all the weight she's taken from me. It's amazing.
So for a moment, everybody just imagine Devin has this insight, and assuming he's able to articulate and share it with his partner in that way, that's really empathic, and now his experience is focused on her and what she's been through. Just imagine how that shifts the dynamic and what occurs. And it's a really great example to inspire all of us to consider, what do we do? What move do we make? It feels like, I forget who said it, but they said, every move we make either makes us open or shuts us down. Every move we make gets us closer or creates polarity. So with the awareness of that and the practice of, I'm going to notice which move brings me closer or polarizes, and I do those reps in the gym, in the emotional gym, you can tune that. You can tune that shit, and you can change how people relate to you because of where your attention is and how you move based on that attention. And that, my friends, is the opening to rescripting the narrative of what do you want and how will it occur?
Yeah, paying attention, noticing, feeling, right? Feeling. And the way that Michael helped to drop us in, to our bodies, right? That's where the feelings are, right? It's called feeling for a reason. We still tend to think of feelings as if it's like, the feelings happen up here. No, the feelings are actually in the body. And so the practice of paying more attention, what I call it personally is, what does my body want? I can often feel it that way. Not just what does it want, what is it telling me, right? And often it's telling me, hey, hang on, there's something here. There's something to pay attention to. There's something like you just spoke to, Devin, something that you noticed that you felt that, if you hadn't stopped for a minute and given it some attention, you could have let it slip, and, maybe it would have come back a year later, or who knows when. Right. But the practice of paying more attention to, again, it can be very literally showing up in the body, tension, pain in the gut, a pain in your big toe, body stress, tight breathing, right? Or, emotional feeling. I mean, feeling, right, manifests in all sorts of ways, but paying attention and taking the time to, and, honor that feeling and do something with it. As Michael said, right, that's the, where we start to get to change the narrative and open up, build more of a connection, let the energy flow between these, I don't even want to say two things, just to bring it back to the whole frame, relationship and sex, right? It's all in this, it's all together, right? The more we can kind of open up the channels, more flows.
Wondering if you guys have advice for those of us dating or embarking on a new relationship, and how to communicate the yearning for both sex and relationship connectivity, I guess from a perspective of what I would like in the relationship, maybe setting the ground rules for the relationship, but also being attractive to the lady that may want that, right? But what's the best way to communicate that?
Yeah, interesting question. Good question, Kevin. I appreciate that. I've been there fairly recently myself.
Just before we answer, Kevin,
Yeah.
I'd invite you to actually feel not knowing and what emotion is associated with that question.
Mm-hmm.
Just what's underneath it for a second. Can you touch that?
What's underneath the question you're asking?
Yeah. Is there a concern? Is there an excitement? Like, what's the feeling state?
I guess it goes back to what I said earlier, is that my MO has been conquest, and my concern, I guess, is that comes across, or that's what sets up the relationship, and that's not what I want. I want the opposite. I want intimacy and love,
So you have some
and sex eventually. Right?
You have some amount of concern or fear or hesitation or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we can answer the question, but I tend to come from the school that more important than the question is that your being state around it. Because I have an imagination that when you say, if you were to say, hey, you know what, I'm not sure how to set these boundaries. And the reason is I have a concern or a fear about this and that. And when we're able to do that, that transparency and that honesty is an amazing filter for someone that is a connection or not.
Yeah, totally. And I mean, I can share. I mean, you had the same question and the same not knowing, which I remember, in fact, sharing with Michael, as a friend over the past couple of years. Just like, I just don't know kind of where I'm at with this or how to present myself. And also I had frankly, some anger and some frustration with feeling like just being a man in seek of relationship makes me like guilty of wanting to perpetrate in some way. And like, there's an assumption that like, again, just like being a man in seeking relationship means that I'm seeking sex. and kind of wanting to perpetrate that in some way on the world. And that even if I say, that I'm looking for connection and, intimacy, and that's all just code kind of, and so that it's very difficult, or I didn't want to try to figure out the right way to say something, because it's, I felt like it's all open for misinterpretation anyway. So I've definitely been there. And in the end, my experience was, just being myself, saying in real time, pieces of that, and kind of what I am looking for, that as Michael said, is like, there's a pretty good filter for, some people who just don't, just don't get me, or are still misunderstanding, or start to respond, or feel the same way, really feel the same way. Yeah.
Here's just another frame or metaphor. When I'm asked to coach execs on interviewing and getting jobs, I ask them, what approach do you want? Do you want to orient yourself so you get every offer and then you decide? Or do you want to transparent yourself so there's a self-selection mechanism, and the offer that you do get will be a really good fit and be long-term sustainable? And that's a choice. And I think dating is the same thing. You get to make that decision and then play it at that level.
Yeah. Great question. Guys, I think we should wrap it up here. Thank you all for joining and participating, and also to you, Michael, for co-hosting with me.
I loved it. I love this conversation. I hope you all find more than you even dream of.
I mean, there's hours worth of topics and questions that I didn't even have before this session that are now running through my mind. So thank you.
Great.
That's
Very well.
That's what we're at. It's working, Bowen.
Yeah, right on, guys. Well, feel free to reach out, and we'll see you out there. Be in touch.